Kia ora and welcome to another Aotearoa Rugby Pod. I'm Ross Karl. We've got a big weekend of action coming up. The final round of the round robin in Super Rugby this year, and we've still got a top 8 that is incomplete, really, isn't it? Anything could really happen here as far as who makes it into those final 4 spots. James Parsons with me in Auckland, and down in Christchurch, we've got Bryn Hall. It's heating up. Obviously, the Blues, we know, are now top of the table. You're obviously stoked about that, the first time in a gazillion years that they're going in.
Just keep our powder dry.
Keep the powder dry. The Crusaders rocked up another 60 odd points, so you're feeling pretty hot coming down into the playoffs as well.
As per.
And the Brumbies, well, they just about shook up the Blues. They gave them a real good run for their money, despite having no possession and no territory. So there's a lot going on at the top. And then what's going to happen below them is a whole other thing altogether. So let's start with the quick fire round. Let's get into who impressed you this round. Player of the round for you.
I want to go Blake Gibson, but I think he's edged by his teammate Julian Savia. I really enjoyed him this round. He was into everything.
For you, Bryn?
Yeah, a couple good guys. Blake and Julian, and then I thought Billy Proctor was really good for the Hurricanes as well. And probably delve in a little bit more into around that line-out attack that the Hurricanes did really well on the weekend. I thought Billy was really good, but I thought Fergus Burke, he was my player of the round. I think considering Richie not being there, and probably the last time he played against the Waratahs wasn't the result that he wanted, the performance that he wanted. But 8 from 9 in the kicking tee, scored a try and really marshalled us around, and probably set us up for that result on the weekend with his play on the weekend.
It was a pretty solid performance from you guys. All up, must be pretty happy.
Yeah, it was, mate. I think, probably that loss from the Waratahs, it's just been a continuation of us trying to kind of simplify and being able to do some things that we weren't doing at the early part of the season. And I think that's our collision area has been really good, both on attack and defence. And so there's been a massive focus around that. You probably look at the Blues. They've probably been the last, 2 months have been the team to watch around that kind of collision area. And so we're trying to be able to get a bit of movement around that. And look, our lightning quick ball was the best on the weekend we've had the whole year. And so we knew that we wanted to put a lot of pressure on the Fijian Drua through our attack, and then also with our kicking game, being able to plug them into corners and making them make decisions where they were going to kick poorly or try to run it out from their half. And, giving 3 points as well was really good for our defence system. That we had a bit of a focus on being able to keep the offload game from the Fijian Drua, which we did really well. And like I said, being able to score 3 points scored against us, it sets us up well going into a Reds team that we're going to have to up it again a little bit more.
But I think it's harder done than they made it look. Like the Drua have put people under the pump physically. Most of their solid games or their wins, they've dominated that collision. And the Crusaders just didn't let them into the match. They didn't let them get their tails up at any stage. They were really ruthless in those collisions, and people will go, oh yeah, sort of expect 61, but that's no easy feat against that side, and I think it does sort of show that the machine's starting to peak at the right end of the comp.
And you mentioned LQB. Now, as we go into talking about the match of the round, that's one thing the Blues didn't get, and what everyone thought would be the match of the round. Is that your match of the round? No,
I was salivating on Saturday, hoping it was going to be the match of the round, but it probably didn't live up to the hype. But I was pretty happy when that drop goal went over. But for me, the Chiefs, I really enjoyed the Chiefs Force game. I just thought that Chiefs team was on fire, and obviously both my mate and I have a soft spot for our mate Gatlin, and I thought he was outstanding on the weekend.
He taking on the line again.
Yeah,
when he looks really good.
Oh, absolutely, and his mate outside him, Quinn Roux, creates a lot of attention, which enables him to have that space to run through.
Your match of the round, Bryn?
No, I actually went for the Brumbies. The Brumbies in the Blues. I think. Look, it probably wasn't the kind of the way the game wanted to play it for Jipper, but I think the turnaround on what the delivery and the messages, what the coaches of the Brumbies were saying around the collision area, and probably if you're looking at the Blues, it's a great way for their review around not getting that quick ball, and they'll probably be thinking around how they can do that better and implement things that can get that quick ball, because I thought the Brumbies were fantastic around the breakdown area defensively, being able to win collision contacts, but very similar to what the Blues do in the ruck, whether it be the tackler or the assist tackler, being able then to flood through and being able to slow down the ball and giving Finlay Christie a bit of trouble around that breakdown ball. So and look, the ending as well, being able to score that try, the Brumbies thought, probably with that line-out drive, it was going to be the end of that game, and then making a decision around if you're going to shut it out to go, minute and a half in the game. And then time and time again, this guy, Dalton Papali'i, continues to keep making big plays for that team. And you'd be able to get that steal to give them an opportunity to be able to then go down, get in an advantage. And then, Bodie slots that drop goal. So, for me, it had everything that I thought I wanted to see. And it was an awesome game. And I was up at late at night watching that game.
I'm not sure Damon Murphy agrees with that accuracy around the breakdown there, Bryn, with 16 penalties going towards the Brumbies.
What I mean around that is that it's probably the first time, even, yes, they did get penalised and a couple of yellow cards, but I think it was probably the first time, I could be wrong here, but you've probably seen it as well, probably the first time in a while that you've seen the Blues not getting that go quick ball, the offload game, and have been able to, dominate and been able to submit teams due to the way they're playing with their lightning quick ball. So even though they get penalised, the Brumbies will look back at that thinking if we can get that right. Like Aotearoa probably had a different view around that in his post-match interview. But, there were a few things there that the Brumbies could take definitely as positive.
No, absolutely. Look, they came with a game plan to slow Pill down. There was no doubt about it. But they were desperate as well. Like they did hold the Blues up 3 times, forced a knock on Kurt Eklund as well. So it could have been a different story, but they had the grip between their teeth on the night. And I think they'll be disappointed that they didn't finish that. We've seen it so many times, Bryn, where you try to close a game out a little bit too early, and you may be better off, continuing to play. But yeah, it was a good result from my point of view, anyway.
They were next level niggly. Like, I thought that actually 16 penalties was probably a little bit light on them. It could have been more, because every breakdown, every offside line, every single time they pushed the envelope as hard as it could possibly be pushed.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that was their tactic. They clearly came in with, we just have to slow that ball down, and we can't allow that quick ball, that Christie and the big forwards, when they get on that front foot ball. We've seen their offload game through the middle and win those collisions. They just didn't get the opportunity to do so. But the one thing that is, outstanding, and we've seen it, a number of times this year, and it continues to happen, is the Blues are finding any way to win, which is not something that you'd probably have tagged against their name of the last few years. So, massive excitement building in the club. But as I say, we just got to keep that. The Blues. We've just got to keep that powder dry.
We know where you stand. We don't have to pretend. We don't have to pretend. The amazing thing was that you wouldn't even call that clutch from Bodie, because they had advantage. He can just have a crack at that. They actually had another way of winning it if they needed to.
Yeah.
Which is amazing considering how far downfield they were only a couple of minutes earlier.
Well, as Bryn alluded to, the work of Daltz to get that turnover. But then, even Heem, his composure out on the edge, it could have been easy to try and push that. But they built phases and they worked their way into it. And even the super sub Big Karl had a few big plays during that last 20 minutes as well. So, a number of players that have probably had lighter loads are starting to stand up in important times of the season.
And maybe alluding to what Bryn said earlier, when you can get a win like that, but also learn the number of lessons that they're going to have to learn from that game, Bryn, because of how things didn't go to plan at this time of the year, it actually in a lot of ways is kind of perfect for them.
Yeah, I think it is. And look, I know you could almost say you're not going to get complacent. And I know that Blues team isn't getting complacent, because with Liam McDonald and the players that they have here and the kind of success that they've had, they'll look at that and thinking like, what a great learning, because for a lot of the weeks they've been able to have things go in their way and been able to dominate collisions, have the offload game, and really put teams away. But a result like that, especially in Canberra, don't underestimate how tough it is in Canberra to go there and win a game in those kind of conditions. It really honestly felt like a finals footy night, a semi-final or quarter-final. There's a lot on the line, and being able to get a result like that, yes, they'll take away some learnings coming into the back end of the season and coming into the finals period. But situational football like that, getting a win, understanding what we might do differently to get a better outcome, you can have those conversations, the early part of the week in their review, to then when they do get in those situations again later in the part of the season, they've experienced it, they've talked about it, and they can go out there and be real decisive knowing what they've done in their homework.
So what do you do this week, Chipper? You've got top spots sewn up. You're coming off a performance which probably, it's great to celebrate, but not as good as you could be. And you're going into a game in Australia against the Waratahs. What do you do in this particular position if you're the Blues? Do you rest players, or do you play your top team?
Well, I think they've potentially maybe get an opportunity to bring a few guys that may have some niggles back with limited minutes. But I do think guys that have had huge minutes potentially get a breather so that they can come into that quarterfinal, because it could potentially be 3 NZ derbies to win it. So I think fresh bodies as much as possible, but there are guys that they may need, determined on injuries, that need some minutes because they've had lighter loads. So I think it is a balance, because if we look at Akira and Reeks, maybe getting them a few minutes after a week or two off will be beneficial. But if you look at guys maybe like Eklund, Tucker, Offa, potentially could freshen them up and give them a bit of a breather. Even Dalton to a point as well, and Hoskins. Whether there's enough team members fresh and ready to go, I don't know. But I'd be looking to get them as fresh and as focused, just to be watching the Highlanders and prepping for that one game.
People will be saying that it's their title to lose in the position that they're in right now. Is it their title to lose?
Well, I always think they're in the best position to win it, because it's in their own, in their own control. If they go all the way, they've got home. That we know how good that Blues side is at home. But as I say, like my old mate here, they know how to win finals footy. They know how to peak. They've got some fairly experienced All Blacks that know that test match level intensity. So they're a real threat. And from what I saw of both the Chiefs, but more importantly the Hurricanes, the way a lot of late shuffles for them, and to put on the performance they did, I think was exceptional as well. Now they've got a bit of a backs against the wall trip to the Force. Sometimes that can, that may make them feel like it's against them, but it also might galvanise them as a group and say, we're going to go out and do something special. So I think there's still a little bit to play out yet, and I think the injuries and the freshness of the bodies will be key.
There's plenty to play out with the Chiefs on 41, the Hurricanes on 38, the Waratahs on 37, the Reds on 35, and even the Highlanders face the chance of missing out because the Force have 2 games this week, and if they nail both of them, then the Highlanders could be gone if they don't get it right themselves against the Rebels. So there's a lot on the line here. Maybe just jumping back to what we were talking about with the Blues and home advantage. You know what it's like to win a Super Rugby final away from home. In fact, the Crusaders, from my counting, have probably won 4, including their first 3, all the way from home.
And probably the hardest one in Joburg.
Yeah, so this isn't something that's going to worry the Crusaders, is it, really?
Oh, I think ideally you'd love to have home advantage, because preparation-wise, it's the best way to be able to win a final. You're in your own bed, got similar surroundings, and it's a great way to be able to prepare for a final. But we have had experience, but to be honest, not a lot of our young guys have been in that cauldron. I think in 2017, a lot of those experienced guys that we did have left, and it's a new team that's been able to have that opportunity if it comes. But I guess for us, we have been lucky enough. There are a lot of guys from that 2017 team that are still around, and if it did come to a possibility of being able to go away from home, then we can go on that experience. But for us, there's a lot of rugby to be played before that, and to be honest, it's just week to week, and you're not given anything. It's this game, you have your last round robin game, and then from there, you're just game by game, and you just take one game at a time. And it's probably going to be the Reds, actually, looking at the table. We could be playing the Reds twice in a row.
Is it a good thing? 2 weeks in a row?
Oh, I think it's different. It's different. Not many times do you play a round robin game and then you end up playing the same team. But I think review-wise, it's a lot easier to be able to then know, it's 2 weeks of being able to see the same opponents, and, you're not going to change much now as a team. There might be a few altering things that you do as a team, and the Reds could do, and vice versa. But I think we can take it as a positive. You're playing the same team twice, and your review is probably going to be a lot easier in your preview, knowing you're playing the same team, and you can concentrate more so on yourself, on what you can get right to try and get the result in the following week.
I think also for the second week playing them, you can have a bit of a lighter load, and I think that's quite key going into quarterfinal. The more you can freshen up the bodies for the bigger opponents ahead, if the Crusaders get through the Reds, the better. So there is a positive in it in that sense as well.
Okay, let's have a look at that chance of making 4th spot and getting that last home playoff game. So the Chiefs, as we mentioned before, currently sitting in that position. The Hurricanes 3 points behind them. You've got the Waratahs also there and for a shot of making it into 4th place. Who do you think is going to take that spot?
You'd have to think it's the Canes. You'd you'd think the Chiefs can do a job. I know they've got to travel to Fiji and play in Lautoka, which will be an intense environment, but I think they'll, with that home quarter on the line, they'll deliver. And the Canes do have a tougher trip, but they are playing a force side that's got to play here in New Zealand on the Tuesday and fly back. So both sides are travelling the same distance, so you'd have to like the chance of the Canes slipping into that 5th spot as well.
So you think there's a more likely chance of the Drua upsetting the Chiefs?
Yep, but I don't think that'll happen either. So I don't think it's a likely. I think it's an intense environment, but I think the Chiefs will be too good.
Yeah. Where do you see it going, Bryn?
Yeah, I see it similar. I see the Chiefs going to get that home quarter final against, and they'll end up playing the Hurricanes. I think they'll get the job done, and then being able to get ready for a tough quarter final. If you're looking around the quarterfinals, that's probably the toughest one. I think looking ahead for next week, and then if you're the Waratahs, finishing 6th, and they're not having to travel too far. If the Brumbies get the job done against Moana Pacifica, they just have to travel to Canberra to probably get a derby game that possibly they could want instead of playing a New Zealand team.
And can the Force do it? Can the Force pick up 2 wins from Tuesday's game against MP and then a game against the Hurricanes? Like, that seems like a step too far, doesn't it, to have a chance of taking out the Highlanders?
Well, if you'd asked me 3 or 4 weeks into the comp, no. But they seem to have just fallen off a cliff towards the end. I don't know if it's depth of squad or having the ability, to be in the one place. Like, their travel regime is a lot harder than most. But I think that's a hefty ask. Like, Moana Pacifica are going to be pretty motivated. They probably haven't had the season that they have wanted, and it's been challenging with the amount of rescheduled games they've had to face. So they'll target this one as one to try and peg themselves off the bottom of that table as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The Highlanders obviously can get in there with a win against the Rebels. That's not necessarily easily done, going away to Melbourne on a Sunday afternoon. They've found themselves in a hell of a pickle, especially at 10, after what happened with Sam Gilbert on the weekend and his upending of Michael Hooper. I suppose, first and foremost, it was pretty reckless, and Hooper was pretty pissed off about it and thought he should miss some weeks, which is rightfully so. But it leaves them probably without him. Mitch Hunt out with concussion. Who plays 10 for the Highlanders this weekend?
I'm going to steal our producer mate Will's idea. He's a big Highlanders fan, and he's suggesting Vilimoni Koroi. He's playing club rugby, and if you think you want to spark a team, especially attacking wise, he would certainly bring something to the table. We've seen him at 10 a lot for Otago at NPC level, and I tell you what, they had a punt with Gilbert and it came off. He wouldn't be too far. And they've still got Marty Banks there as safety, but I think if you're going to have a crack, you might as well put him out there to start, and then someone of Banks' experience can come on and settle things down if it doesn't go to plan.
What do you think, Bryn?
I think they'll go with Marty. I think they'll start with Marty, and then if you bring Vilimoni Koroi onto the bench to be able to cover that role, and if you need that kind of impact, I think having him coming off the bench is probably the option. But then, Ross, you brought up a pretty good idea, having old Aaron Smith and Fla Whakatava, the 9 and 10 combo.
Well, we've seen TJ drop out to first receiver, right? We've seen a fair bit of that. In fact, on the weekend even, there was a couple of nice touches from TJ at first receiver. Whether you'd want to do it for a whole game is another thing altogether.
Well, we've seen it, and I think nobody would have thought Gilbert was going to be able to play 10, with Hunty being there. So, look, would not be surprised if Tony Brown chucked out some of the 2 9s playing 9 and 10. But I think they'll go Marty Banks and then possibly Koroi on the bench.
Yeah. Good luck to them. This might not even be an issue for them as far as the qualification is concerned, maybe if it wasn't for that red card. Do you think that they would have won that game if Sam Gilbert was still on the field? Definitely
changed. Like, the Waratahs took full advantage of that 20-minute period, didn't they? And they went into the break with their tails up. And I do think it potentially would have given them a better opportunity, but I thought the Tars played well, and they, like we've seen a lot of time when these red cards have happened, the team that actually has received them is almost, galvanised and turned up time and time again, but it wasn't the case, and I think it was the way the Waratahs went about their business. They were pretty direct. They wanted to suck in defenders, give themselves the opportunity out wide, and if it didn't suck in defenders, we saw with Will Harris's try, they just went straight between them and scored points that way as well. So I actually think it was well orchestrated, that 20 minutes from the Tars.
One thing's for sure, Tony Brown was pissed off. And there's no other way of putting it. In the post-match, there were a few beeps probably needed. Unfortunately, it's live television and you can't really do much about that. He attributed it to poor preparation and a lack of commitment. Is that a fair assessment, Bryn?
Oof, man, it's tough when you hear that kind of stuff from your coach. Preparation, first and foremost, is probably one of the most important things. And if you're having that question, then you're probably not getting your homework throughout the week. And, it comes into a point where you're not decisive, being able to be real clear around what you're doing, and then your intent. If you talk, what was the other word you used, Ross? What other word did Tony use?
Lack of commitment and poor preparation, as well as the F
lack
word
of commitment. Yeah, minus the F word. Commitment. I think it probably very similar actually for us against the Waratahs. We talked around our commitment and being able to, was our mindset really there against the Waratahs? And I know for us as a group, so this is probably following on for them going over to Melbourne. You'd like to think there's going to be a flick in the switch to be able to get that mindset right, knowing that there's a quarterfinal berth and being able to get more confidence going into that. Because look, if you're not getting your preparation and your commitments being asked of your coaches, I know as a senior leader in that team, you'd be thinking, all right, let's get behind me and being able to let's rectify this. And it doesn't come into question ever again in your team, because that hurts the player job. I know if you ever got your preparation questioned and your commitment, that's a really tough one to look in the mirror if you're getting those things questioned as a team and as an individual.
Yeah, it would be pretty hard to hear, but from what I know of Tony Brown, never been coached by him, but he's a player's coach. So he does have the ability to get what's needed out of the players, and potentially, yes, he would have been frustrated, but potentially he was looking to get a reaction and a sharpness in their focus going into this week, so that they give themselves an opportunity. We know this side, man, if their back's against the wall, they're a serious threat, and we've talked about options at 10, and yeah, they don't have a lot of Super Rugby experience, but Marty Banks has won a title, and Koroi has carved many a team up. If the players like that can get going, there's still enough there to light things up, and maybe he was just trying to put that fire in the belly for them so that they could go to Melbourne, get a job done, and do it convincingly to send a message.
And I mean, a week can make a big difference. Only last week we were talking about how they were coming on strong. This week we're talking about the lack of preparation and commitment. So in a week's time, we could be talking about them coming on strong again.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I just think they've faced some challenges other teams haven't, and a lot of it's around injuries, personnel changes, not being able to have a settled 15 going into the finals. It does play a big part.
I'm not sure if you guys read this, and this is going off script a little bit. I read an article that the 20-minute red card is soon going to be Gonski's. World Rugby doesn't want a piece of that. It quite likes the 50-22 and it quite likes the goal line dropout, but the 20-minute red card could be a thing of the past. What are they
going to go to?
Just back.
What are they going to go to?
Back to the old one.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I'm a fan of 20-minute red card. I've said it time and time again. I think we've got a opportunity to move with the times a little bit and make sure that our product's delivering what our consumers need, and 15 v 15. More often than not, there has to be a penalty, and sometimes that comes at the judicial level. And 20 minutes with 14 players to me is a pretty severe penalty. And as I explained, the Waratahs implemented their game plan very well when they were down to 14. And other teams could have done that, previously. So a lot of times when a red card's given and the team that got the red card wins, it's not a great advert for it, is it? Because people feel like if you get a red card, you should lose. But it's not always the case, even when they go for 70 minutes. You've got to execute the right plans, and you've got to react to the defensive pitches that you're given to score the points still.
Yeah, it seems like it's basically a reaction to the fact that there's not enough punishment and these things are still happening. But in the end, Bryn, the effect on the game is probably more detrimental than that. If they're happening anyway, they're happening anyway. Yeah,
but I also think as well, like, if that's the decision, that's the decision. We just got to get on with it. Like sometimes we dwell on these things too much. Like, if that's what it is, we just need to move on and find ways through it. Like, I think we've got to start promoting our product and talking about it in a positive light rather than getting caught up in things that are out of our control.
Yeah. Don't stop me from getting into micro details.
Yeah.
What do you think, Bryn?
Yeah, I think, funny enough, we actually got told that today from Razor around that law possibly being checked. Not that 20 minutes is going to go, but the fact that, probably World Rugby are thinking that they're not getting it right and there's been not enough punishment for people to get the action that they're wanting around, not enough red cards and getting, whether it be a tip tackle or a tackle technique, they're finding that they're not getting the rewards around the change that they need. So you're taking away the ability to be able to have that 20 minute and then rewarding the player, rewarding the team to be able to bring somebody back on. They're probably finding that it's not a harsh line and being able to go back to normal and then really having an influence on a game instead of that 20 minutes. We've seen it with Sonny Bill, the example that's been used a lot. Coming in the first 10, 15 minutes, it's much easier to be able to hold on and being able to simplify your game plan for 20 minutes, let alone for 60 minutes, which is really tough to do. And you lose test matches when you lose a pivotal person, whether it be like a first five or a seven or a midfielder back for long periods of time.
And if people are angry about the way that these laws, are looking for safety first and forgetting about necessarily the fact that rugby is just one of those games where sometimes a bad angle happens, this is really going to piss them off because it's taking the punishment to the next level, right? And all of a sudden, it's going to be in a place where they're not happy. Yeah,
but it's not a foreign concept. It's been around since the end of time. The 20-minute is the foreign concept, and it clearly hasn't reached the levels, or I suppose everyone in the world hasn't agreed that it works. Some parts of the world, I think, we're pretty evident the Southern Hemisphere enjoys it, but, clearly the Northern don't.
Look, because I'm off script, I'm going to stay off script, and we're going to jump straight into our Rethinking Rugby segment. We've been doing Rethinking Rugby for a few weeks now. We look at things, at new ideas that can change the game. This week, I'm going to look at an idea that's been changed that, in my opinion, has changed it poorly and it needs to be changed back. World Rugby is going to carry on with the goal line dropout. Now, on the weekend, we saw the Blues held up 3 times and then have a goal line dropout come at them. Now, in my world, if you get over the opposition's goal line, you should be rewarded. You shouldn't be rewarded for holding up someone who's 100 metres downfield from where you want to be. It should be a scrum. It should go back to a scrum because this does not reward you for getting over the goal line, which is what you're trying to do. That has got to go, in my opinion.
So, when I was a player, this came in, and I remember Tom Commentary and myself sitting down like a couple of old battlers and said, we're ruining the traditions of the game, it takes away the pick and go, it's taking away from our scrums. But the more and more it's come along, I think there needs to be something else, because I just can't listen to people saying they don't want to see scrums every 2 seconds. So if we add scrums back in, that's only going to elevate and heighten those issues. So why not? And have a look at the Barbars under 20s. I've put a lot of thought into this.
Yes.
And their little wall chip kick, we bring back, if it's held up, you've got to do a wall move. Simple as that. A tap wall move.
Yes.
And you've got to bring back some thought and a little bit of Barbars flair, force Barbars flair.
Yeah, that's amazing. A wall move.
Did you see the New Zealand Barbars 20s?
No, I didn't.
Oh, have a look. Go on their Instagram and have a look. Unbelievable. Nakota Broughton literally catches the ball, kicks it over his head, and they score. They chase through, catch it, score. Mate.
He's in the wall and he kicks it over.
He's in the middle of the wall, kicks it over his head, and then one of the players comes from, I think it was the centre, came from the centre and caught it, scored.
Wow.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was done in the Barbars. I remember they did the actual Barbars. Gus knocked it on. Colin Slade.
I was in that team, and I think it was Stephen Luatua kicked it over his head, and it was supposed to be like Colin Slade or something running through, and big Gus got excited and he went off script and he butchered it.
We like that though, a war move. That's some 80s stuff.
That's Barbars flair, mate.
Yeah.
Just bringing it back to Super Rugby.
But this goal line dropout is wrong, right? It just doesn't, it's not right in that situation.
I think one thing you possibly could do, if you're thinking outside the box and you don't want, as a purist, having the scrums back, it's just a tap. The team that has the ball then just has to tap the ball and they can play.
That's where I was going with the wall move, mate.
Not a wall. You don't want to have a wall. I'll tell you what.
Mate. Force the wall. Hashtag force the wall.
But yeah, the idea of a tap, it takes it away.
Yeah.
You still have the team that had the
Imagine a tap,
still
Bryn.
cannot.
As soon as it's held up, the person that's held up gets up rather than waiting for TMO. He knows he's held up, and you can go as quick as you get it back to the 5. And you're away. If the attacking team feels they're held up, and TMO's like, cool, boom, you're gone.
Yeah.
So you got to be like, you'd have to be on edge.
Yeah, and you have to have the ref in the right position.
As a player, I know that let's say you look at the Brumbies game, for example. The Blues were dominating that first half and being able to be camped up in in their half, and you build a lot of pressure. You're down that 22 metres for a long period of time, and you almost, when they go over and you've been able to hold up, honestly, it just feels like your pressure's relieved. You're like, you know what, man, thank God that's done. We can just set our line, we can take a breath, get a deep breath, and then be able to then set our line, and then we can boot it 50 metres, and the pressure's off right then and there. Yeah. So I agree with you, Ross. Being able to have the ability for the team that has the ball in that line-out moment, even though they haven't scored the try, I think, you're right. They still need to be able to have the ball, and that can be just with a tap or a hashtag wall.
Hashtag wall move. Brilliant.
Or give the team the choice. But I like the idea of cutting out the TMO, and if you know you're held up and you get that ball back quick, you try and catch teams off guard, because so many tries get scored that way as well. Yeah, I just came up with that on the fly. I went off script.
Yeah, perfect.
I still want the wall in there somewhere.
Yeah. But you have to get all of those forwards to somehow get back 5 metres super quick with Brumbies lying all over the top of them.
Just quickly, and then penalty try if you hold them back or something. Just be real ruthless on it.
Super ruthless. I've just got this image of Bryn Hall taking that tap, passing it to the wall, and doing the halfback scoot around the back of the maul, like the fake one where you pretend you got the ball, like you've almost stuffed it up your jersey and you're carrying on around the corner.
We did an awesome one when the NZ Barbars played the Māori, and we did a wall, and Ben Tamiafuna ran from like 20 metres back, and he went through the middle of the wall, and he was like centimetres from scoring, but it should be a big job.
Yeah.
You get a big fella coming through the wall, you grit your teeth, bite down on the guard.
It's a beautiful thing. I've got a really good memory of the 1991 World Cup and Zinzan Brooke going through the middle of a wall move against Italy, I think it was, and he just went like that. The Red Sea parted and Zinzan Brooke went through and try time.
Beautiful.
It is a beautiful thing.
Was it 35 years to the day yesterday? Oh no, Sunday.
Since John Kerwin's try in the
against Italy,
World Cup. Yeah.
Jeez, that's gone quick.
Yeah.
Even though I was 1 when it happened, but there you go.
Wasn't even there.
I actually don't think I was 1. I was 0.2.
Still a memorable moment for you.
Oh, massive.
Yeah, huge moment. Speaking of Auckland wingers, that was a great segue, by the way. Caleb Clark, injury this weekend, he's got a bit of a hamstring, could be out for a few weeks. Where do the Blues go in that position if Caleb Clark isn't around, and how does it affect the way that they're performing over the next few weeks?
Well, I think they've been pretty fortunate in that spot. AJ Lamb's been, really strong when he's had opportunities. You could even look at moving someone like Bryce Heem out there to have a bit of experience. So I personally don't think that's an area that they're light in. And I think they'd be better off taking the time and, if they get the ability to, if it is a couple of weeks, getting him potentially to the semi-final rather than trying to rush him back. Because I just think there's more than enough depth in that position for them. Yeah.
Where would you go if you were them?
You've got AJ. Yeah, I thought AJ Lamb for when Caleb Clark was injured earlier part of the year. He was, you probably say one of the form wigs in the competition, and so his ability to be able to play a straight swap for Caleb. You've also got like Bryce Heem with the experience. With his ability to fix it, really. He's great under the high ball. I can imagine his communication skills, or having that understanding of being a winger as well. But then, that's with Rico obviously coming back in centre. Not too sure what his time is. But yeah, I'd go probably Bryce Heem or AJ Lamb. But you do lose something with Caleb Clark. And look, I know they've got some good backups, but I'll tell you what, even though he's the first part of that game, his ability to break tackles one-on-one and what he can bring to that Blues team, he's a big loss for them, even though they do have a bit of someone in behind.
You do lose something because he is a game breaker. Like, even on the weekend before he did it, man, he's just something else.
Yep.
But if there's a time to do it and it's a 2-week injury, you'd much rather, I'm just saying, if it was a quarter-final and he was going to miss a semi and a final, I think it would be, a bigger problem to solve. But I really rate AJ, and I think he loves an opportunity. He's been great for NPC, and he's had a number of opportunities at Super Rugby level. And I think he's shown he's good enough for this level, so he'll embrace. Yeah, he'll embrace the opportunity in his relaxed style. So it'll be exciting.
It has been a lot of fun watching Caleb, those massive legs and a big, powerful ass that he's got. And you watch him break through those tackles and go, how the hell do you stop that?
How many
lower
touches
body
does he want?
Outrageous.
He's just up, he's into it again, he's coming from all angles. It's great to see.
Oh, so yeah, it's one of those ones where you go, I watch the game to watch people like that. Like you actually get a little bit excited going, Caleb Clark's going to be playing today, and that's pretty cool. That's what it's all about, right?
100%.
The other person who got out on the weekend was Sam Cane. Obviously the All Blacks captain, obviously pretty worrisome as a knee injury for the Chiefs heading into the playoff time. Bryn, how can this affect their playoff run? Do they have the cover required to be as strong at the breakdown and the tackle area as they would have been if Sam Cane was there?
Oh, look, I think any time you lose a guy like Sam Cane, he's a world-class player. And so, the depth that they would have, you've obviously got Jacobson, you've got Peter Gus as well there, and other players that they can be able to put in there. But whenever you lose that kind of leader and that kind of presence and player, it will affect the Chiefs. But, they've got enough depth in that squad to be able to facilitate towards that. And hopefully, do we know how long Sam's going to be out for?
We don't. We don't know how bad it is yet. But I think a player probably put his hand up to potentially solve that issue on the weekend with Finau. So, they get Lord back, potentially Retallick. We've seen Tuipupu's ability to play 6. Finau could play 6, and then I think Jacobson could fill the 7 jersey. Yep. I don't know where Mitch Carpick's at. He's another option as well. So and Peter Gus going back to 8. So I think they've got enough depth in that position. No one's going to be able to replace Sam Cane. Let's make no bones about it. But I don't think it stalls their season.
When they did miss Sam Cane a few years ago, they had Lachlan Bashir, who was arguably the player of the tournament each year. Through those times. So it's a bit tougher, isn't it? But those times without Sam Cane over the years have probably allowed them, much like the Crusaders often do, to build a certain amount of depth.
Yeah, well, positions. You even look at Kalen Boshier this year playing at 6, a couple of games in a row. Like he made my full 15 a couple of times. So he's another name that I'm not sure of his injury status or if he's available. But the thing is, there's a lot of depth there. They've got the ability, and one thing with Clayton McMillan, he'll just find a way, and that's the same with the Chiefs. And Brad Weber, the skipper, will just be business as usual, I'd say.
Yeah, and there were some players on the weekend, Bryn, for the Chiefs. I mean, I think we've already mentioned your boy Bryn Gatland, but gee, some of the players outside him were pretty hot on the weekend.
Yeah, they were. Look, I thought it's a good chance to probably talk about Quinn Roux. I thought he was outstanding on the weekend. His ability to be able to go back to that 12 jersey around where he's made most of his money and where he wants to be with the Chiefs and the All Blacks. But his ability to break the line. He's just deceptively strong. I wouldn't say Quinn is quick, but his ability to be able to break contact and get through those little gaps where you think, is he going to get through, and he ends up getting through or with an offload. And I've also enjoyed his distribution game. So I think for the 12 in the All Blacks, I think having that ability to be able to distribute is going to be massive. And I think the positive that Quinn does and what he does really well is being able to be really good into contact. And I think he continued to do that on the weekend as well.
I think all 12s that are in line for the All Blacks have got the distribution skills. I think where the point of difference will need to be is getting over that gain line, like a Matanonu, like a Ngani Laumapi, and busting, getting front foot ball, and that's what Quinn did on the weekend. So too, I thought Jack Goodhue, he looked like a centre at times, the way he distribute, especially that try to Severis, like you just saw how good he is. It just reminded you how good he is as well. So again, it's just cramming up again, but not to take away from Quinn, because I thought he was fantastic, but what his point of difference is man, he just gets over that gain line, and he doesn't look like a huge customer, but he just must be seriously powerful and strong and smart. Like Bryn says, he picks in, he gets in between tacklers rather than trying to go over top them.
When I think about Jack Goodhue, my first thought is good lines, good distribution. I don't necessarily think gain line. He's got a bit of that in his game, Bryn?
Yeah, he does. He's about 105 clicks at the moment, so he's got a big boy. But I think
it's not
Jack
a
has
massive
the ability
part
to
of
be able
your
to do that.
game plan, though, is it? Really, like it doesn't mean he can't do it, but it's not a big part of the Crusaders' DNA that crashing 12 all the time.
That's what I mean. I think what you saw probably on the weekend, the ability that Jack has to be able to get that last pass away under pressure to put people away, is his biggest. Is his biggest strength. I look at the one he gave to Sevu, his ability was almost in the air getting tackled. It was able to get that ability out the back, and even playing off 9, the wide pass to 12, and his ability to go straight to the line, very similar to Dave, to be able to get it out the back. But I think you're right, Jip. It's just probably not in our DNA to be able to do that crash bash. But I think at the next level, and what we saw, played out pretty evidently in the Rugby Championship and the Northern Hemisphere Tour, you've got to be able to have that combative style and getting over the advantage like a Ma'anonu or Nanilau Mapui, and again still having those distribution skills that all these 12s probably have. But it's that person that's going to be able to, I think, win those collision areas and being able to get over the front foot. Is going to be probably really important when selecting the midfielders for this, the Island series and moving forward.
Especially early in a test match. Not to get onto the Irish test matches, I am a little excited, but I just think early in a test match that's going to be so key. Is off line-outs, off scrums, trying to be direct, take it to them, get good clean-outs, quick ball, and almost like they did up in Dublin where they scored. They got those deep cleans and they come around the corner forwards and try like that. That's such a key part, and something Bundy does really well for Ireland.
And that's what I mean around that, Joe. I'm glad you brought that up, because if you look at Bundy, he's not a big guy.
No.
He's stocky and he's very similar to a lot of our builds in the New Zealand 12s. But what Ireland do so well is they give him opportunities to be able to play and ball play, whether that be a one-on-one. He's got to try to fix his defender because he's got so much animation and that lightning quick ball that the Irish get. It gives guys like Bundy Aki the ability to be able to play on top of teams and make decisions, where I think probably last year in the All Blacks, it probably wasn't like that. The ability to be able to win the gain line and win those collisions wasn't being able to give the likes of Dave and our midfielders to be able to show their distribution skills. And earlier part of the year, you look at probably playing the Australian teams and even Fiji when we played them, the ability where Dave and our midfielders were able to then have their distribution skills, and it wasn't so much of that crash bash and being able to get over the gain line. It's been able to go to their skills and what they're really good at skill sets with our 12. So, but again, I think what we saw from the India tour, you've got to be able to have that in your game, because it was evident when we played in the Northern Hemisphere style that we needed that moving forward.
Talk a little bit more about animation, because when you talk about Ireland and even Leinster, when you watch Leinster as well, animation is a key thing. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so let's use the example that probably most New Zealand teams and all around Australia off a line-out drive, you've got pretty much every single team is hitting the 12, and then you've got a 13 outside the 12 running a down line, and you've got a 10 and an 11. Those are probably the 4 players and the animation that you want to work collectively to be able to manipulate the defense. So an example that Jip used earlier in the year was when we saw Aaron Smith defending on Davey and Leicester. It's the ability to be able to Davey fixes that first guy, whether it be the first defender. Usually it's a 10. You want to get to the 10. And that 12 is running, or whoever that midfielder is running hard into that space, inside shoulder of the 12. And then you've got the 10 and the winger on the outside, going out the back, who is trying to fix the 13, who's outside the 12. And you've got the disconnection of the winger. So if you look at actually the Hurricanes, for example, off the line-out strikes, this is another example. You look at the disconnection and the ability of them to be able to, the line of Billy Proctor, to get into that space and then being able to go around them, had the Rebels in absolute all sorts. So, but you only get that right if you're running the right lines and you've got the right animation. So if that centre's too early, or the guys in the back, whether it be a 10 and a winger, are coming around swinging, they're too early or too late, it's so easy to be able to make the defensive reads a 13 and a winger in those outside channels. So look at the Hurricanes, the 2 Hurricanes. So if we get a visual around what that looks like, it's a perfect way of how you manipulate, and your animation is at a world-class level. And the Hurricanes did on the weekend when they played the Rebels in that kind of 13 and winger transition role on the weekend.
But I think it's also the consistency of those lines. So defenders are only going to get confused if you run the exact same line at the exact same time and you hit someone else. And using Davey's example or using the Hurricanes example, both times they picked the right guy that had, they read the defence. So the defence gives you the cues who you choose. They've read that he's bit on Proctor, so they go out the back and they score down that way. Next time he tries to hold out, they go short. That's not easy, that decision. We sort of talked about Bryn Gatlin early in the year, and it's one thing those guys giving animation around a Bryn Gatlin when he's running to the line, but it's another thing picking the right guy. I think we used the Moana Pacifica game where he chose Nankivell, and I think he put Slater through as well. So it's one thing having the animation, but the consistency of the animation is what makes defences think, okay, who's it going to now? Because this looks exactly the same as the last time it was run and they hit that guy, so I'm going to him, and then it's like, boom, they hit Proctor.
Yeah.
Try time.
So to take
I
this
think
back...
I think also, Ross, if you look at Ireland, if we're looking around how they play, let's take another level to international level. If you look at the forwards and the ability, you'd probably look at, the reviews and the media actually saying around the forward play of our tidies, which, whether people want to agree with or not. But if you're looking at Ireland around how their ball carriers and how close they take it to the line and their animation and their skill set of that, let's look at the three forwards and you've got Sexton in the back and then runners off that. You look at the animation of how much they take that to the line. You've got a guy running an inside line of where they need that space to make the decisions for the defender. Sexton's coming around the back, and then you've got guys that are running in the exact same hole where they need to be every single time. So if you get in there on top of a lightning quick ball, it's so hard for defenders if you're consistently running those same lines and your animation out the back of rovers, whether it be a blindside winger or it might be a fullback in and around the 10 as well. It's really hard to be able to defend. And I think Ireland, their forwards and their phase play shape is probably the best in the world at the moment.
And is that where the All Blacks are falling down? They're not getting the lightning quick ball required to put the animation into play?
Well, it makes it a lot easier when you win those collisions. You're on the front foot ball. You're running into spaces rather than a wall. So it's easier to run a down line to an inside shoulder when they're trying to backpedal to get onside and then to come up and bring line speed. And then you're just picking them off. And that's when Ireland are the best. But they are selfless lines, animated lines, like especially for some forwards. They might run that tip all day and they'll never get it. But they're always committing that defender. I'm committing you every time because I'm running into that space. And if you're not selfless and you think, actually, I'm just going to rest this one, well, then that opportunity out there, people can read that body language. So, I think Ireland's forwards discipline is outstanding. And we've used Furlong and Porter a number of times, but they run literally the same line every time, and that's why they're so good at it now.
And they have the skills to back it up.
Yeah, and I think what Bryn's saying as well, they run square at the line, so they really line you up, they commit you, and someone like Furlong still has the ability to give it out the back to Sexton, which is not like it seems easy, but at full pace test match level, it's quite hard.
Yeah. A good example of that is around like you said, the ability. A skill set's really, really hard. If you're trying to go right to the line as a ball player and for a forward, and then you've got to be able to look at him right at the last moment. You're putting that trust to be able to just put it out in front for Sexton or that 10. It's really hard. You probably see some teams that don't do it well is they'll get too scared. They'll go to the line, they'll attack the line, but then they'll turn early and they won't go hard to the line. And so then as that guy that's reading the tip and the outside or going out the back, it's so much easier to be able to push off and you don't have to account for that tip ball, knowing that hook ball or the guy that's going releasing it out the back, it goes too early. It's so much easier to read. And so, like I said, we're using Ireland as an example. That's world class. But for our viewers, if you look at that, if you see it's going too early, look at the movements of the guys that are in that kind of pod and see if they're doing it too early or they're going right to the line with a great animation of tipping out and going out the back.
Because I think as a defender, I'm just thinking as a forward, as soon as you see someone's hips spin towards the sideline, they're passing. They're not going to run that way, are they?
Yeah.
So that's the key cue as a viewer. If you're seeing guys throwing that ball where they catch it and they're swinging their hips to turn, then that's not going to commit a defender. But if they're looking right at it and then almost it's a no look.
Yeah.
You always got to trust your skill set and just put it out there. And that takes repetition during the week.
Yeah.
To build the courage to do it.
Well, you're throwing a no look here like you've done it a million times.
Oh, just a couple, but normally just tuck it under and then I just get absolutely pole drive back about 6 metres. But I'm retired now, so I can pretend I was good.
But to take it back to where this conversation absolutely started, which was with Quinn Roux and allowing him to be himself within a system, I feel like what we've seen from Roger Tuivasa-Sheck can also work like that. And while he's not necessarily bash and crash, his late movement at the line allows a very similar advantage line kind of area.
Yeah, and I think if he can build in time his late movement at the line and then distribute, then you're really going to start asking questions of defence because you're just going to have all sorts. So his game's going to only get better. And he's a real option, and he's got a real point of difference, doesn't he?
He does.
I think one thing that you'd probably like to see Roger do a little bit more is probably just the kicks as well, Jip. I think probably at the next level, if there's a bit of pressure through, if it's Bodie or Richie at 10 and you've got the ability to be able to rip it back to that guy, if he's going to be 12 in that kind of second pivot role, get it off the ball. I think it'd be just nice to see possibly seeing that kick into space, a long kicking game or even little grubbers on the edge, because his footwork and being able to get through contact is such a positive in his game, and he's been able to get defenders to miss and been able to go over the advantage line. It'd be just good to see if he can be able to bring that kicking game in and being able to see how that goes, because you're going to need that at the next level.
Love to see his defensive chase down at White too.
Yeah.
Man, when he just put the afterburners on, he just mowed him down with ease. I was like, man, he's a lot quicker than you think.
Yeah, and over a long period of time as well. Like he had to run 60 metres to get to the point where he put the afterburners on. And
if you use Stevie as an example, like Stevie's quick, and you watch him when he decides to pin his ears, he's like, and I know it was a high tackle that he got penalised for, but it was still pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was a necessary tackle.
It needed to happen.
Yeah, if you didn't get him there, he might not have got him at all.
No, and he would have been angry because he dropped the ball, so it would have given him the grunt to get there, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another game over in Australia over the weekend was the Reds versus Moana Pacifica. The Reds 34, Moana Pacifica 22. Now, Moana Pacifica obviously have 2 games to finish off Super Rugby season. They've got a game against the Force on Tuesday, and they also have the game against... no, they don't. Where are we? I've just lost my page here. Against the Brumbies as well, this time at home. So when we look at that and how they're going, what is success for Moana Pacifica over the next 2 weeks to end up their first season and not be in a place where this is kind of in the doldrums?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge the amount of rescheduled games. Like no other team has faced that. So you have to acknowledge that, and it's their first season in Super Rugby Pacific. So there has been some elements out of their control, and no doubt they would have targeted a few games, the Drua, they potentially would have targeted a few more Aussie derbies, but through situation, whether it's illness, injury, they haven't been able to get that consistent team on the paddock. But I think at times we've seen how good they can be and will be. It'll be that probably the consistency over the 80 minutes, because in patches they had a lot of ball, a lot of territory on the weekend, and statistically they had more defenders beaten, they had equal line breaks, so they create the opportunity. It's going to be the finishing is key, and then in time I think their defensive structures will only get better and better as the players learn each other. Like it does take a bit of time, as Bryn will allude to, but I think the next 2 weeks, if they can get 1 out of 2 and prop themselves up potentially with a couple of bonus points and somehow find a way to 13th, then I think they'll be pretty happy with the way they've fought out of a challenging season, more for them than most.
Difficult being an expansion franchise, even more difficult when luck just doesn't go your way, Bryn.
Oh, yeah, to acknowledge, I think Jack brings up a great point around their scheduling. It's been brutal. And I think, first and foremost, to be able to go down to Queenstown and be able to start in the Super Rugby Aotearoa, the kind of first part of the comp and playing in those derby games, and, having reschedules through COVID, being able to, not play, week to week. It's been able to be, games here and there, storm kind of weeks of playing back to back. And then the ability to be able to, come to the back end of the season, probably not getting the results they probably wanted playing these Australian teams. The Fiji and Drua was probably a game, they had that on that schedule that they were wanting. And I think, what Jip said around the finishing, being able to do that more consistently, because, like you said, they got in a lot of games, they've had a lot of opportunities, whether it be through long passage of play and not being able to finish, or whether it be some weeks might be through set piece, not getting the set piece right in those big moments, or defensively as well, not getting there right. But I think a good result, probably these next 2 games, has been able to, a win would be great. But I think for, from Aaron Major, being able to just have a real enjoyment of the last 2 weeks and what they've been able to do, and been able to collectively come together as a group. You'd probably think refresh the group and been able to have a lean menu, and just going out and really expressing themselves, and being able to, if that comes for a win, or it's an intent, and we're seeing a better intent, and being able to play a little bit better, then I think it's a successful result for them, because, look, it's been brutal. The schedule has been absolutely brutal for that team, and if they can get a win, or they show improvements in certain areas that they want to, that's a good way to end their season, I think.
Yeah. Well, why don't we have a look at our Super Rugby Dream Team?
Oh, yeah.
Let's get into it, what the boys are into. So Super Rugby Dream Team, of course, is what we're doing each week to see who the best players in Super Rugby are. Get into it on RugbyPass.com. Put your team in. If you are the closest to the team everyone's picked, you get yourself a subscription. This week, Caleb McPhee, you're the winner. And, of course, the winner at the end is Caleb. Go, Caleb. You've done well.
Good on you, Caleb.
At the end of the season, the winner will come on here, and I presume that's the end of the Super Rugby season. So we're only a few weeks away from having someone come on and absolutely slate us for being all over the place. So let's get into it. Your dream team for the week, Jibber?
1, Tavita Mafaleo from the Canes, Ricky Jackson at 2, Angus Tarvell at 3. I've kept Tucker. I thought he got through his work for the Blues. Samapeni Finau at 5, Blake Gibson, who was close to my player of the round, at 6, Dalton Papali'i at 7, Will Harris from the Tars at 8, Bryn Hall at 9,
Yes.
Bryn Gatland at 10. I do want to make mention of Morgan, Burke and Barrett. It was a really tough position for me to pick, that 10, but I just thought Gatland was outstanding when he runs the line like that, and his willingness and courage on D. If you look just before half time, you watch how he rushes out and he stops a certain try for the Force, puts them back in. That period of D before half time was crucial in that game and giving them the ability to get out there, and he was good both sides of the ball. Lester Whainganuku at 11, 12 Quinn Roux, 13 Billy Proctor, 14 Julian Savia, my player of the round, and 15 Shea Fihaki.
Julian Savia was pretty damn scary.
And that Goosey with the fend, I've already spoken about it, but it's just... then the pick through the middle, outstanding.
Looking
good. Is he in your team?
Yeah, Jules is. Yep, he is. He snuck through with, I think, Sevi played well, but I think, Julian Sevi was outstanding for the Hurricanes on the weekend. So I'll start with the big boys. I had the Chiefs popping duo. I think Gus and Adam Ross, they were great on the weekend. I actually had also a notable mention for DLB, who I thought was great for the Highlanders in a losing game. Went Ricky Jackson at hooker. Went Finau. I was going to go Swain from the Brumbies, but his yellow card unfortunately makes him miss out for Sam Whitelock. I've gone same on this war trio.
Tough disciplinarian. Bryn Hall.
He is. He's a man of the law. He's a man of the cloth.
I've got Blake Gibson, Dalton Papali'i, and Ethan Blackadder, and then I've gone 9. I've gone TJ, who I thought was great on the weekend, back to his sniping best and influenced the game really nicely for the Hurricanes. I've actually gone. I've got to go for Fergus Burke as my player of the round, but Gatland was pretty close, especially with his running game and what he brought to that Chiefs game. I've gone Leicester. I've also gone Quinn. I thought Jack Goodhue went close. He had some nice touches, but I think Quinn's just pipped him. I've gone Billy Proctor from the examples that I've used and those selflessness and his ability to run those lines and also carrying the ball as well in his defence. I've gone Julian Severe, and then I've gone Shea Fihaki at fullback.
Well, why don't we finish off with a look towards this round ahead, the final round of the round robin with so much at play. Let's skip through to Friday. The Crusaders against the Reds.
Crusaders. I'd say by plenty.
Yeah.
I just think the Reds have, they're just not the same team that was coming out the, back of that first part of the comp. And the machine is rolling.
It's rolling.
Well, back us. Thanks.
Well put. The Drua against the Chiefs, Bryn.
Chiefs.
Yeah, Chiefs. I'm looking forward to Lautoka though.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be great scenes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's exciting.
They do love the Drua. From what I understand, the Crusaders are the number one team in Fiji outside of that. Like, I remember going to that game between you and the Chiefs, the very first one, and it was absolutely ridiculous. Like the amount of Crusaders supporters.
It's a different beast in Fiji, and I know Clayton McMillan. He'll probably be thinking around. I remember his experience when we went over there for New Zealand Māori, and we played Fiji over there, and we got pounced in that game. We got smashed in that game. It's a different beast when you play in their conditions in front of their people. And I know that probably Clayton will be using that experience he had in New Zealand Māori to know that there's a storm coming. There's a big It's a big contact session coming your way as a Chiefs mana players.
And they're noisy. It is loud at that stadium.
Yeah.
It's really loud.
That's going to be a doozy.
It's doozy. Actually, the other thing.
Chiefs 1-12 could be a good punt. Bet responsibly though, of course.
Yeah.
$2.
I can't bet, so
no, you can't. I'm just saying to the listeners, it could be, based on what I'm hearing here, guys, is it could be a tight fixture.
Yeah, it could be a tight fixture, absolutely. Just to say, I'm not sure if I've said this on the show before, the best toilets in all of Super Rugby, in any Test match stadium I've been to. You go into the toilet and there's a window in front of you and you can see the game. Like the ground is in front of you. So there's no,
That's forward thinking.
It's brilliant. So there's a urinal, it's about a 10-metre urinal, and you can all line up. And it doesn't matter if you go during the game because you can still watch the try get scored. It's incredible.
Outstanding.
There you go to all world sports. You've got to have your window like that.
The window out of the loo.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant.
Trendsetters, Fiji stadiums, trendsetters.
Ahead of the game. MP versus the Brumbies, Bryn.
Yeah, Brumbies.
They'll want points.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Waratahs Blues?
Blues.
Yep. By much?
Yep.
12 and over.
13 plus.
13 plus. If you were allowed to bet, Bryn, would you be looking at that?
I'd go Blues. I'd just be interested to see what squad they're going to send out. So dependent on Blues are going to win, but you'd be interested to see what their selections are, knowing that they've sewn up the first position.
Force v Canes?
Canes.
Yep, Canes.
I actually think the Force have got the harder travel. Because they're playing Tuesday, and I know they're going home, and it sounds ridiculous, but
no, that's much more difficult.
Yeah,
you've got to not just get your body right, you've then got to make that massive trip.
And they've been on tour, and depth is tested, so yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty difficult. The Hurricanes' home advantage over in Perth, and
there are a lot of Kiwis over
there. There are the Rebels versus the Highlanders, Bryn.
Highlanders.
It's a hard one because the Rebels put on such a good fight against the Chiefs on an afternoon game at home. Yeah. I do think Hodges' injury looked quite bad, and he is a key player, so I think I'll stick with the Landers.
The Landers, and that gets them in at 8th place and lining up the Blues more than likely. So that's kind of actually not a bad effort from the traditional New Zealand sides. The 5 of them being in the top 8 is a pretty strong showing, especially considering the strength we've seen from the Aussie teams this year. In fact, if you look at it, you look at that table, tradition is what it's all about. You've got the Reds, the Waratahs and the Brumbies, and then the 5 New Zealand teams that have always been there.
I think that's what we both picked at the start of the year.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So it says a lot about...
Yeah, you got one on me there, Chip.
Oh, you went Force,
You went Force, and you went Waratahs.
Yeah.
Yep.
It says a lot about having long-term structures in place and what that means to being successful.
Absolutely, and that's what, with MP and the Drua is, I use defensive system because it is something that you've got to do and know your mate inside and out, and that takes a lot of time, and that may be a couple of seasons. And that means you've got to keep the same squad as well.
Yeah.
Tough job.
Tough gig. Speaking of tough gigs, Bryn Hall, this weekend, good luck against the Reds at home.
Thanks, mate.
Looking forward to another good occasion, maybe seeing you in the Dream Team again next week.
Yeah, well, you went well. You don't score 61 points unless that ball's being distributed at pace. Those wide, fast balls cutting out 4 or 5 defenders,
That's what it's all about.
It's outstanding. Allowing his team to play flat and fast.
So, thank you, Bryn.
Thanks,
thank you, Jipper. Another Aotearoa Rugby Pod out of the way. We'll see you next week when we know exactly who is in the semis and where they'll be playing. Actually, the quarterfinals, isn't it? It's the quarterfinals, I'm sorry. Probably need to get that right.
Semis.
That's the semi-finals. We'll see you all next week. Enjoy your footy.